He wasn't supposed to die. Commander Brax had been the face of Earth's peace treaty initiative, a former soldier turned diplomat, known across the sectors as the man who could calm a riot with just his voice. He didn't carry weapons. He didn't wear armor. He wore the badge of peace and walked unarmed into alien war zones just to stop bullets from flying, and they killed him. The news came through a shaky transmission from Keltar Prime, a dust-choked colony in the Outer Rim where humans and the Zalari Confederacy were supposed to be negotiating territory lines. Earth had sent Brax as a gesture of trust. One human, alone, with no escort, no defense drones, just faith that the words they signed on paper still meant something. What came back was a mangled body and a blood-soaked flag of Earth stuffed in his mouth. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a rogue faction. The Zalari didn't deny it. In fact, they broadcast the execution to their colonies like a trophy hunt. That was the last message the United Terran Alliance ever received from Keltar Prime. Back on Earth, every media outlet tried to spin it calm. Is retaliation necessary? Can diplomacy still work? The bureaucrats wrung their hands, afraid to call it what it was, a declaration of war. But on the lower decks of the war fleet, where real soldiers lived, there was no debate. They murdered a peacekeeper. Earth didn't send words back. Earth sent me. I was part of what they called the Ares Protocol, an unspoken military doctrine buried beneath layers of redacted files and deniability. It was created decades ago for one reason: to remind the galaxy what humanity was when you tore off its mask. We had rules. Rules Brax followed. Rules they shattered. The moment his body hit Earth soil, we were activated. My name doesn't matter. Not anymore. I've burned away whatever was left of the man I used to be. All that matters now is the war machine, the full, unchecked force of Earth's vengeance, bred for precision, brutality, and complete planetary submission. We didn't come to negotiate. We came to level Keltar Prime. The fleet stretched across the horizon. Dreadnoughts, dropships, orbital cannons, assault mechs. The Zalari thought they knew human warfare. They'd seen our skirmishes, our posturing, our patience. They never saw what happened when we stopped being patient. The drop was silent. No broadcast, no threats, no ultimatums. First wave went in with incendiaries. No need to spare infrastructure. Second wave were mechanized hunters, programmed to clear every tunnel, every hideout, every living trace. By the time the boots-on-ground team, my team, touched down, there wasn't even smoke left to choke on. But I wasn't there to kill Zalari. I was there to find the one who gave the order to execute Brax, because peacekeepers don't just die, they get made examples of. And someone out there thought that was a good idea. I wanted him alive. Because while death is quick, regret is slower. We moved through the shattered remains of Keltar's central city. Their temples were crumbling, their data towers in ruins. Civilians tried to flee, but the Ares Protocol didn't allow for escape routes. This wasn't justice, it was dominance. They screamed that they hadn't done it, that it was a rogue command. Too late. They should have screamed before they broadcast his death. My squad split off, clearing corridor after corridor. Drones buzzed over us, scanning for heat signatures. Then the ping came through. Life form detected. Command tier. Sector Epsilon 9. The bastard was hiding in a bunker beneath a broken courthouse where Brax once gave his last speech. I remember that moment. His voice, calm, proud, speaking of unity. Now his blood soaked the very ground I stepped on. I turned to my sergeant. "We're breaching," I said. He didn't even nod. He just loaded the charge. Because that's what Earth is now. No more tolerance, no more talk. You kill one of ours, we erase you. The walls were shaking as the charges blew. Debris rained down like dust from a broken tomb. My boots crunched through scorched tile and shattered metal as we moved into the bunker, one step at a time, muzzles aimed forward, hearts pounding with something that wasn't adrenaline. It was vengeance. We were trained for silence, but inside, the hate was loud. The room beyond the blast was dark, emergency lights flickering red against the chaos we'd carved into the planet. Pipes hissed, and somewhere a siren wailed in a loop that had long lost its meaning. Every step we took into that corridor was a reminder. We weren't here to restore order. We were here to punish. Sergeant Reek moved on my left. A ghost of a man, scarred from 3 planetary sieges. Didn't speak much, didn't need to. His eyes had seen enough to know when it was time to pull the trigger and when it was time to let someone beg first. The heat signature was moving, crawling deeper into the bunker, trying to escape through old service tunnels. The coward didn't even try to rally his guards. He knew what was coming. You don't order the death of a peacekeeper and expect negotiation. "You think it's him?" Reek muttered through the comm. I stared down the long corridor, lit in pulses of red. It better be. We didn't slow down. 2 levels down, we hit a checkpoint with 2 guards still holding rifles. They weren't even aiming, just trembling, too stunned to realize the war machine had arrived. I shot one in the leg. Reek shot the other in the chest. Clean, efficient, no second thoughts. "You have 5 seconds to tell me where your command officer is," I said, walking toward the one still breathing. He clutched his thigh, hissing through alien teeth, blood pooling under him. "He went for the vault. South tunnel, emergency exit." "Code? I don't—" I crushed his windpipe with my boot. Not for information, for Brax. We found the tunnel easily. Old system, hand-scratched signs, barely any light. The deeper we went, the colder it got. You could feel the guilt in the walls, like the planet itself knew it had invited something unforgivable. And then we saw him. He was crawling, literally, through a maintenance shaft no wider than a human coffin. Robes stained, one eye swollen shut, skin pale under the pressure of atmosphere loss. His name was Virex, the same Zalari diplomat who'd shaken Brax's hand for the cameras 3 weeks ago, all smiles and peace slogans. The same bastard who laughed during the execution stream, seated beside his warlords like it was a sports broadcast. "Pull him out," I said. Reek reached in, grabbed him by the spine ridges, and yanked. He squealed like a dying rodent, claws scraping at the metal. It didn't matter. We dragged him out and threw him against the wall. He coughed blood, eyes darting, looking for mercy he was never going to find. "I'm a diplomat," he choked. "So was Brax," I answered, and slammed my rifle stock into his face. He dropped, gasping. "No trials?" Reek asked, almost casually. I shook my head. "This isn't about trials. This is about memory." I leaned in, grabbing his chin, forcing him to look me in the eye. "You executed a peacekeeper on a live stream. You broadcast it to send a message." "I wasn't the one who—" "You wore your command pins during it. I counted them." His silence was guilt enough. And then I pulled the tablet from my chest rig. The one Brax used to carry. I'd kept it since the day we got the news. Still worked, despite the bloodstains. I played the last recording he ever made. Not many had heard it. Just a message he sent to Earth Command the morning he entered the Keltar negotiation hall. "I know some of you think this is foolish. One man, no armor, no weapons, facing centuries of mistrust. But I believe in the idea that peace can't be forced. It has to be offered, openly. I go not as a soldier, but as a symbol. If they kill me, let the galaxy remember. I died unarmed, so that they would show who they really are." Virex squirmed. I didn't blink. "You showed us exactly who you are," I said coldly. Then I turned off the tablet and ordered the squad to move out. But not before I tore every command pin from Virex's chest, one by one, as he screamed. I left him alive. I wanted his people to see him broken, trembling, shamed. Let them decide what his life was worth. Back on the surface, the fleet was still purging. Kelter's atmosphere had turned orange, thick with smoke and ash. What cities remained were piles of slag. The ground crews reported zero resistance. Civilians surrendered in masses, some begging, some cursing. It didn't change anything. We weren't liberators. We were the mirror. We showed them what humanity became when peace was met with betrayal. By the third day, Kelter Prime was under Earth control. The Zalari Confederacy went silent. Entire sectors of their empire started pulling back, deleting records, trying to distance themselves from the execution. Too late. We already had the footage. We already had the names. Brax had become a symbol, not of peace, but of the last line crossed. I watched the footage again that night, sitting alone in the bunker that once held Virex's war table. My armor still reeked of plasma and ash. I hadn't taken it off in days. Somewhere deep in my gut, I felt it, the guilt. Not for what we did, but for what we had to become. Brax believed we were better than this. Maybe once, we were. But peace isn't real in a galaxy that only understands force. He was the last man to believe otherwise. And they crucified him for it. So now we show them what happens when Earth stops believing in peace. We didn't celebrate. That's the thing outsiders never understand about us. When Earth goes to war, there are no victory songs, no flags raised in triumph. We don't take joy in blood. We take it because it's owed. Keltar Prime lay in ruin. Their broadcasts had gone dark. Orbital satellites burned in our atmosphere like dying stars. The last resistance pockets had either fled into the deep system or surrendered with hands raised and eyes full of fear. But there was no applause when Command called it a success. We didn't win. We answered. The dead don't need parades. They need to be remembered. A week after the purge, I stood where Brax had died. The courtyard had once been a monument of diplomacy. Stone columns, flags of every race flapping in artificial wind. Now it was just scorched earth, stained black from where his blood had pooled. I hadn't spoken to anyone in over 36 hours. I just stood there, watching the flicker of broken lights and collapsed towers. The sounds of orbital ships hummed above, keeping watch. Drones buzzed like angry insects, patrolling the ruins. Then the comm cracked in my ear. "Commander, we've got movement in the deep colonies." I pressed my finger to the receiver. "Go." "Multiple Zalari factions refusing to acknowledge your terms. Looks like some of them are preparing to retaliate." I almost smiled. Let them. But it wasn't bravado. It wasn't rage. It was exhaustion. The kind you feel when you realize this galaxy isn't going to change. It just keeps dressing up cruelty in different uniforms and asking you to believe the lies. The war machine doesn't hope. It operates. I headed back to the mobile command post we'd set up near what was left of the planetary governor's office. It was more of a shelter now, cobbled together with plasma shields and hardened steel. Inside, Reek and the others had assembled around the holo table, maps glowing, sectors blinking with red threat markers. "Zalari Central Command hasn't responded to our demands," Reek said, gesturing to the display. "But we've intercepted chatter. They're calling us terrorists, saying Brax faked his own death, that it's all propaganda." I stared at him. Then I leaned forward and played the last 20 seconds of Brax's execution. Again. His face bloodied, still defiant. His last words, "I came to make peace. You came to make a memory." Then the gunshot. No one spoke when it ended. "Let them lie," I said, "but we'll make sure they choke on the truth." We started prepping for the next deployment. This time, a central command hub on Zalari Sector 14C. A key installation, civilian-heavy. Not a place you target unless you're sending a message. And that's exactly what we were doing. The orders came straight from Earth's Black Council. No prisoners, no broadcasts, no demands. We weren't offering diplomacy anymore. This was retribution doctrine. By the third day, our fleet was already en route. We moved in silence. The soldiers didn't cheer. They just strapped in, armored up, and stared straight ahead. Even the rookies weren't nervous anymore. That scared me more than anything. War wasn't turning them into killers. It was turning them into believers. Believers in fire. The drop on Sector 14C was smoother than Keltar. Less resistance, but more civilians. They didn't even try to fight, just stood in the streets, watching our dropships descend like metal angels of death. And still, no sign of Central Command. We fanned out, clearing neighborhoods, industrial zones, old government halls. Most of them were empty, evacuated. That's when we found the vault, buried under an old observatory, locked behind layers of biometric security and encryption. It wasn't in the maps, wasn't even on Zalari Planetary Registry. Took our techs 4 hours to breach it. Inside we found files, thousands of them. Not just about Brax, but about Earth. Surveillance records, genetic logs, internal psyops designed to fracture human leadership. Evidence of manipulation that went back decades. They didn't just kill Brax. They'd been preparing to destroy everything he stood for. They wanted Earth broken from the inside. Turn our diplomats into fools, our soldiers into monsters. Paint us as aggressors while they orchestrated our collapse behind curtains of fake alliances. And Brax? He'd figured it out. There was a note, buried in one of his final encrypted messages to Earth Command, never decrypted until now. It read, "They're not here to make peace. They're here to make history without us." I stood in that vault, breathing hard, not out of fear, out of clarity. They never wanted a truce. They wanted to erase us from the story. This wasn't about Brax anymore. This was war for memory. I looked at the files again, then at Reek. "We broadcast this," I said. He raised a brow. "I thought we weren't playing the PR game anymore." "We're not," I said. "But they are. Let them see the truth. Let the entire galaxy know the Zalari wore peace like a mask, while they plotted genocide in silence." Within hours, the files were uploaded, transmitted across Earth systems and Alliance-friendly channels. Footage of Brax's final minutes played side by side with intercepted documents detailing coordinated attacks on Earth diplomacy chains. The reaction was instant. Colonies that had doubted us went dark with shame. Neutral systems sent quiet messages of alliance. Even old enemies of Earth paused, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. Brax had become more than a symbol. He had become a spark. But sparks alone don't burn empires. We do. Back aboard the Dreadnought Judicator, I stood at the viewport, watching Sector 14C's skyline vanish under cleansing fire. I wasn't proud. I wasn't angry anymore either. I was focused. "You think this ends with the Zalari?" Reek asked beside me. "No," I said. "This ends when every species that watched Brax die and said nothing learns to fear the silence they left behind." The broadcast worked. Too well. Within 48 hours of uploading the files from the Zalari vault, entire systems started collapsing under the weight of shame and panic. Ambassadors resigned. Treaties were burned. Old alliances went cold. Some races blamed the Zalari, some blamed Earth. A few tried to play both sides. But one thing was clear. Nobody believed in peace anymore. The galaxy was reverting, back to what it was before the United Terran Alliance came into the picture. Back when every species was out for itself, and war wasn't the exception. It was the ecosystem. And we? We had stopped pretending to be the shepherds. We were wolves now. The Judicator jumped to high warp again, this time headed for the Ankar cluster, an area outside known political jurisdiction, unaligned, lawless, the kind of place diplomats avoided and mercenaries were born in. Our target wasn't a world, it was a man. Name: Tor Nexel. Former Zalari High Strategist. Retired. Unofficially advising multiple underground cells from exile. He was the one who, according to the decrypted files, pushed for Brax's assassination and laid out the propaganda strategy to spin it as a heroic act. He thought he was untouchable now. Living in some rock-hollowed luxury hideout, surrounded by private guards and ex-military defectors, far from the systems still smoldering from Earth's wrath. He was wrong. The first strike came from orbit. We didn't even warn him. 2 tungsten rods, fired from the Judicator's primary orbital launcher, punched through the mountainside fortress like it was paper. 1 minute, the compound had a skyline. The next, it had a crater. We hit it hard, but not enough to kill him. That was the point. We wanted him scared. Running. I was already in the dropship when the secondary scans confirmed survivors inside the bunkers. Reek checked his pulse, armored gloves clanking against his rifle. He didn't say anything. He never needed to anymore. By now, every man in my squad understood this wasn't about orders. It was personal. Deeply, irreversibly personal. As we landed, fire bloomed around the ruins. Automated gun turrets tried to target us, until our drones fried their systems with a blackout EMP burst. I stepped onto the blackened ground and moved toward the nearest access tunnel. Inside, we found scattered resistance, half-alive mercs choking on smoke and blood. No discipline, no loyalty, just bodies with guns and fear in their eyes. I didn't ask them questions. I gave them examples. I shot one through the knee and asked the rest who wanted to talk. Within 10 minutes, we had Nexel's location. A secondary panic vault, 3 levels down, sealed by retina scan and biometric print. Custom tech. No override. He thought that would stop us. I had Reek bring up the retinal extractor, and we pried access from the one fool loyal enough to die for Nexel. The vault door hissed open with a quiet, mechanical breath. And there he was. Older than I expected, thinner, wearing civilian robes, half-burned. His eyes were wide, bloodshot from smoke, fingers trembling over a pulse weapon he hadn't even charged. "Don't," I said, stepping inside with my rifle aimed at his chest. He froze. "You're Earth," he whispered. "No," I said, stepping closer, helmet retracting. "I'm the bill coming due." He raised the weapon. Reek shot it from his hand before it moved an inch. Nexel screamed, clutching the ruins of his fingers. I grabbed him by the throat, lifted him to the wall, stared into the coward that ended Brax's life with a command and a smirk. "I watched what you did," I said. "I watched my friend beg for peace while your people laughed. I buried him without a face, without honor." "You're here to kill me, then," Nexel choked. "No," I whispered. "I'm here to take your voice." And then I reached into my belt, pulled out the old translator node Brax used in his diplomatic sessions, burned at the edges, blood-stained, cracked. I shoved it into Nexel's mouth and activated it. "You want to speak?" I said. "You do it through the last thing he ever carried." Then I turned on the camera drone. Because some executions weren't meant to be hidden. They were meant to be seen. The footage went out 2 hours later. No edits, no cuts. Just a full 30-minute stream of Tor Nexel breaking down in fear, sobbing, trying to deny his part in the betrayal, only to be confronted with the very documents he authored, played back on a loop beside his broken face. When it ended, I gave one last order. Put this on every frequency. Let them all see what silence costs. And then I walked out of the bunker, leaving Nexel behind. We didn't need to kill him. His own people would do that after watching the broadcast. Or worse, they'd let him live. Stripped of power, humiliated, hated by both sides. That was always worse than death. Back on the Judicator, things were quieter. The crew had started calling us the funeral fleet, not because we mourned, but because we brought the end to illusions, to treaties, to the idea that humanity could be tamed. There were protests on Earth, of course, politicians trying to reclaim the narrative, saying we'd gone too far, that we were no better than our enemies. But they were wrong. We didn't become monsters. We were made this way. By every peace treaty broken, by every human diplomat assassinated, by every handshake that hid a blade. Brax wasn't a saint. He knew the risks, but he believed the galaxy had one last chance to evolve, to move past blood and domination. And when they killed him, they made their choice. Now we were making ours. The fleet didn't stop. There were still worlds that gave shelter to the Zalari, still corporations that funded them, still cowards who claimed neutrality while letting assassins hide in their shadows. So we burned every trace of them. I stopped asking why. I just made sure the memory stayed alive, not of what we did, but why we did it. Because one day when I'm long gone, someone will dig through the wreckage of this galaxy and ask how it all fell apart. And maybe, just maybe, they'll find Brax's recording. They'll hear his voice, and they'll understand. It wasn't war that destroyed us. It was the lie of peace. We didn't get rest. Not the kind that mattered. Sure, we slept in armor, slept with weapons clutched tight, slept under artificial sky panels that faked peace with soft light and programmed stars. But there was no resting the mind. No peace inside the chest. Only the dull echo of what we'd done. What we were still doing. The Judicator drifted above Sector 7J, a border system no one used to care about. Dust rock, mining colonies, barely stable trade routes. But lately it had become a staging ground for Zalari splinter cells, those not brave enough to challenge Earth directly, but slimy enough to sabotage refugee camps, bomb trade convoys, and broadcast fake peace offers laced with virus-coded messages. Cowards playing resistance. They thought they were clever. They forgot Earth was still listening. A scout drone picked up the signal first, an encrypted transmission from a freighter claiming to be a humanitarian ship, carrying neutral aid for post-conflict settlements. The encryption was old, one we cracked months ago when we raided the archives under Keltar. Took 5 seconds to unscramble it. The freighter wasn't carrying aid. It was carrying munitions. And more than that, it was broadcasting a covert directive to execute sleeper agents hidden across neutral systems. The voice giving the order? Not Zalari. Human. We traced it to a man named Lem Carden, a bureaucrat turned war profiteer, once a mid-tier functionary in Earth's Trade Alliance Corps. He'd gone dark after the first retaliation strikes on Keltar, and now he was hiding among smugglers and mercenaries, funneling weapons to anyone willing to fight Earth, Zalari included. A traitor. And in some ways, worse than the ones who pulled Brax's trigger. Because Lem knew Brax, had shared meals with him, laughed with him, called him brother in policy, and then sold weapons to the people who burned him alive. Reek stood beside me in the command room, watching the decrypted feed play out. "You sure it's him?" he asked. I nodded once. Voice print matches, and he used the old trade sigil in the command line. "So now we kill our own?" "No," I said. "Now we purify." We didn't tell command, didn't ask permission. Men like Lem weren't covered by protocol. They weren't bound by war crimes tribunals or justice panels. They lived between cracks, greased by credits, and protected by people who still believed the war machine had brakes. We set course for Valor Station, a neutral hub where Lem had last been seen docking under a false name. It was the kind of place that claimed to ban military entry, but always made exceptions for the right bribe. We didn't bribe. We boarded. 4 squads, full armor, no insignia, no transmissions. We walked in like ghosts, blacked out, weapons up, eyes cold. The station was crowded. Traders, pirates, refugees, all packed into a shell orbiting a dead rock. They scattered when they saw us, most thinking we were bounty hunters. We didn't correct them. We hit Lem's docking bay in under 9 minutes. He was already trying to leave, firing up the engines of a stolen diplomatic skimmer. I jammed the thrusters remotely and walked through the bay doors with Reek and 2 others flanking me. Lem turned, hands raised. Pale, sweating, coward's smile curling on his lips. "Gentlemen, look, I know how this looks, but I fired a shot into his thigh. He screamed and dropped, clawing at the floor. "You were only what?" I asked, stepping closer. "Profiting off a war you helped start? Selling weapons to the same hands that mutilated Brax on live feed?" He coughed, blood on his lips. "It's politics. You don't understand." "No," I said, kneeling beside him. "You don't understand. You're not in the game anymore. You're in the reckoning." He tried to crawl. Reek put a boot on his back and pinned him flat. We didn't kill him there. Killing would have been too easy. We took him. No trial, no fanfare. We dragged him onto the judicator, chained him to a chair in the interrogation bay, and turned on the same recording we'd used on Nexel. Brax's final message. His voice played over and over, filling the cold steel room with the sound of a dying man who still believed in humanity. Lem didn't cry. He didn't plead. He laughed. "They always kill the idealists first," he said, half choking on his own blood. "That's the price of dreaming in a galaxy like this." I stared at him a long time. Then I walked out. Not because I was done, because I was waiting. A day later we received a message. From Earth Command, encrypted, short. "Bring him home, alive." I didn't like it. Reek didn't either. We weren't in the business of delivering prisoners anymore. But this was different. Brax had no family left. No children. No wife. But he had one older sister, living in the old Terran settlements near Mars orbit. Civilian. Quiet. Never involved in policy or politics. But she'd asked for something we couldn't refuse. She wanted to see the man who'd helped end her brother's life. We docked at Mars Orbital 2 days later. I delivered Lem Carden in chains, face bruised, limping, eyes dull. No one spoke on the descent. We brought him to the observatory where Brax had once given his retirement speech, back before he took the diplomatic post on Keltar. Before any of this. His sister stood at the edge of the observation deck, looking out over the red plains of Mars. Small woman. Gray hair. Quiet strength in her posture. She turned when we approached. And when she saw Lem, her expression didn't change. Not even a flicker of emotion. Only her voice. "Software. Do you regret it?" she asked. Lem looked at her, lips cracked, blood dried at the edge of his mouth. "No," he said. "That was it." She nodded once, then turned back to the window. "I didn't come here for justice," she said quietly. "I came to remember the difference between the two of you." Then she walked away. Reek leaned in. "Now what?" I looked at Lem, then back toward Earth's horizon, where the sun was rising through the atmosphere, streaking the sky in gold and crimson. Now what? Now we go back. Because the war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. Lem Carden wasn't executed, at least not yet. Earth Command locked him in a black site on Europa's shadow side. Off the record, off the map. A place even ghosts were afraid of. That didn't sit right with me. Not because I wanted him dead, though I did, but because it confirmed something darker. Earth wasn't just using us for revenge. They were collecting monsters, keeping them alive, studying them, learning from them, preparing for something bigger, something we hadn't been told. Reek and I returned to the judicator. Quiet. Tired. That kind of tired that sinks beneath the bone and wraps around the soul. We didn't talk about Lem, or Brax's sister, or the look in her eyes when she turned away from the man who helped end her brother's life. Because we knew what that look meant. She had buried her hope. And now, so had we. But there was no pause. No chance to breathe. As soon as we docked, orders hit our feed. Mission Priority Alpha. Unauthorized military activity detected in the Archon Fringe. Zalari remnants suspected. Full clearance for eradication. I didn't flinch, but Reek raised his brow. The Archon Fringe, he said. That's supposed to be uninhabited. It was, I muttered. Which means someone built something out there, and they don't want anyone to know what. 3 hours later, we were back in the dropship. No ceremony, no debrief. Just the machine grinding forward. We jumped into Arkan space under cover of deep stealth. Not even our transponders pinged the local satellites. They didn't exist anymore. Every orbital platform had been disabled. Burned out from the inside by plasma blasts. Signs of a recent battle. But not between us and them. Something else had happened here. The planet below wasn't on any star chart. No name, no designation. Just a mass of gray rock wrapped in storms, faintly pulsing with artificial power signatures. Scan for structures, I ordered. The AI responded coldly. One facility detected. Subsurface, power output consistent with pre-war Terran tech. Reek leaned in. Terran? As in ours. I nodded. But it's not on any Earth Command registry. That's when the truth started to crack through the edges. We weren't here for the Zalari. We were here for something Earth lost and didn't want found. We dropped. The facility was buried beneath kilometers of stone, shielded by layered alloys and energy-dampening fields. Old tech. Black project levels. The kind of place that gets built by men who'll never admit it existed. We breached it through a service tunnel. Cold. Dead. No bodies? No signs of life. Just rooms full of machines still humming with half-life. Data screens blinking. Files flashing warnings. Reek and I moved through the corridors like shadows. Then we found the central chamber. At first I thought it was a stasis lab. Rows of pods lined the walls, human forms inside. Some male, some female, but all clearly altered. Enhanced, bone plating, neural uplinks, gene splicing, Earth's work, experimental soldiers, weapons with skin. Most of them were dead. A few twitched under frozen sedation. And in the center, a single empty pod. Its display blinked. Subject, a 1, status, released. That's when the alarms screamed. Motion sensors activated, drones launched. The lab wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. And now it knew we were here. Fall back, I shouted. Get the data cores and pull out. Reek yanked the storage drives from the mainframe, sparks flying as the system protested. We fought our way out, through drones, through lockdowns, through corridors that tried to seal behind us. Whatever Earth buried here, it didn't want found again. But they'd made a mistake. They sent us. We escaped with one transport. Scorched and smoking. The others didn't make it. As we reached orbit, the facility below self-destructed. A blast that turned half the planet's crust to glass. They buried it for good this time. But we had the drives. We decrypted them back aboard the judicator. The files confirmed everything. Brax had been right from the beginning. Earth had known the Zalari weren't interested in peace. But instead of stopping them, Earth let them think they were winning. Let them sabotage, infiltrate, corrupt. Because behind the curtain, Earth wasn't building peace. It was building super soldiers, war machines wrapped in flesh. Brax wasn't sent to Keltor to make peace. He was sent to stall, By time for the A1 program to mature. He was a pawn, a noble, well-spoken, tragic pawn. They let him die. And when he did, Earth used it. To launch us. To launch the Purge. My chest burned like ice. Reek said nothing for a long time. Then finally he looked at me, jaw tight. "We were never the response," he said. "We were the plan." I nodded. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to fight for. Only what to fight against. I sent a private message to Earth Command. "You sent us for justice, but you were playing chess. Brax wasn't your casualty. He was your cover. If that's what we are, if that's all we've ever been, don't bother sending more orders. We're not listening anymore." There was no reply. I didn't expect one. We cut communications, powered down long-range beacons, and drifted off-grid. The Judicator was a ghost ship now, but it still had teeth. I gathered the crew. Those who still believed in Brax, not in black sites and shadow wars. Those who still remembered why we pulled the trigger the first time. And we looked at the galaxy, not as soldiers, but as witnesses. We knew the truth now. Earth didn't send its war machine to answer evil. It sent it to manage the chaos it helped unleash. And we had a new mission now. Burn the lies. Expose the architects. Let the stars remember Brax not as a pawn, but as the last honest man in a galaxy of liars. The crew didn't mutiny. That would have been cleaner. They just stopped looking at command the same way. For days, the Judicator hung in dead space. Lights dimmed, comms cold. Power set to minimum to avoid scans. Officially, we were still Earth's warship. Unofficially, we had become something else. Something Earth never intended. Free. But freedom isn't quiet. It's not comforting. It doesn't feel like release. It feels like floating in the dark, with nothing but the weight of every order you followed and every death you justified under someone else's flag. And I was the one who had to decide what came next. I sat in the main briefing room alone. The datapads with the decrypted A1 files scattered across the table. Photos of genetically spliced corpses, mind-wiped operatives, files labeled Loss Acceptable Subject B, and Field Test, Civilian Targets, Strategic Fallout. All of it hidden. All of it funded by Earth's secret councils. Long before Brax was sent out. Before Keltar burned. Before the broadcasts. They didn't want peace. They wanted provocation. They needed a martyr to unleash us, to see if humanity's response force could truly reshape the galaxy through fear. And we proved them right. But I didn't feel like a victor. I felt used. I stared at Brax's last message again. The one I kept looped on my private interface. His voice still calm, still steady, still hopeful. "If they kill me, let the galaxy remember. I died unarmed, so they would show who they really are." He was talking about the Zolari. But now I wondered, was he really talking about Earth? Reek finally stepped in, armor half-clipped, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "You've been quiet," he said, sitting opposite me. "Too much noise in my head," I muttered. "You're not the only one." I looked at him. He tossed a chip drive onto the table. It slid across and hit one of the datapads. "What's this?" "Crew vote," he said. "We took it last night." I raised a brow. "Vote?" "Unofficial," he said. "Off record. You weren't supposed to know. But I think you should." I picked up the chip and slid it into the console. The result blinked on the screen. Continue under Earth command. 3 votes sever command loyalty permanently. 117 votes. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that number. Reek didn't flinch. "They're not scared of Earth anymore," he said. "They're scared of what we'll become if we keep following them." "Are they ready for what happens if we don't?" I asked. He gave me that same dead-eyed stare I'd seen on Kelter, Sector 14C, and the vaults of Archon. They're already living it. Silence settled between us. Then I stood, walked to the holomap console, and activated the DeepNet beacon, restricted only to high-priority field operatives. It opened a secure channel back to Earth Command. It rang, and someone answered. A voice I hadn't heard before. Male. Clipped. Synthetic clean. "This is Central Black Operations Interface. State your code and objective." "I know what you've done," I said flatly. No code, no protocol, just truth. "I know about A1. I know Brax wasn't a peacekeeper. He was a countdown. You let him die so you could justify the machine, so you could release us." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're not authorized to access classified," I cut him off. "You put weapons in our hands and told us it was justice, but it was always theater. You just wanted to see if we'd finish what you were too cowardly to admit you started." A pause. Then a cold voice, different this time. Female. Calm. Older. "Commander, your results speak for themselves." I swallowed. My throat was dry. "So that's it? You just wanted to see how far we'd go?" "No," she said. "We wanted to see how far you'd let us go." My stomach twisted. The call cut. Reek looked at me. "What now?" I stared at the screen. "Now we show them what happens when you train a monster to kill lies instead of enemies." We set a new course, not toward a target, but toward Earth, not to destroy it, but to reveal it. Every colony, every fleet, every sympathetic ear we could reach, we sent them the data, the recordings, the dead files, the logs from the Archon vault, the proof of Brax's sacrifice, and we labeled it simply Operation Iron Funeral. Within 72 hours, we'd sent the message to over 300 systems. Some refused to believe it. Some called us traitors. But more than a few? They listened. Fleet captains sent encrypted responses. "We've suspected. Tell us what you need." "We're with you, but we need time." We saw the broadcasts. We saw what happened to Brax. We're done being pawns, too. Even some old Earth diplomats, retired, disavowed, came out of hiding to speak publicly. The machine that made us strong, it was cracking. But Earth Command wasn't sleeping. They declared us rogue. Branded the Judicator as a terrorist vessel, put bounties on my head, said we'd been compromised by alien tech, claimed we were carrying experimental pathogens. Same old lies, different spin. We didn't hide. We made ourselves louder. Everywhere they broadcast their slander, we pushed Brax's voice in return. His final speech, his hope, his peace. And side by side we showed his body, what they did to him, how they let it happen. Because this wasn't about fear anymore. It was about reminding the galaxy what we once believed in, and the cost of selling it for a weapon. It was never about Earth. Not the soil, not the cities, not the flag stitched onto our uniforms. It was about who we became when we stopped believing in peace. And now Earth Command was calling us the enemy. They had fleets circling every trade route, checkpoints established in deep space, scanners running 24/7 across the net grid, trying to locate the Judicator, trying to erase us from the map, from memory, from the very narrative we once enforced. But we weren't hiding, not anymore. Our message, Operation Iron Funeral, had caught fire. The data we leaked about A1, about Brax's true purpose, about the secret operations buried beneath the Archon fringe, it all flooded the galactic undernet like blood through shattered glass. And while Earth tried to scrub it clean, something happened we hadn't expected. The silence broke. One by one, other captains came forward. Old war dogs who'd once retired in shame. Diplomatic officers who'd been forced out after asking too many questions. Even a few intelligence agents still buried inside command started sending leaks through back doors we never even knew existed. They sent us data. testimonies, locations, names, and they all ended their messages the same way. For Brax. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was a reckoning. We had one target left, the place where it all started. SolNet Core, the broadcast tower orbiting Earth's moon. Originally a peaceful communication node, repurposed during the expansion wars as Earth Command's central media and fleet coordination hub. That's where the lies lived. That's where they edited the footage of Brax's death before releasing it to the colonies. That's where they killed the truth and replaced it with obedience. And that's where we were going. We couldn't take Earth. Not directly. Too fortified. Too many defense platforms. Too many blind civilians who still believed in the official story. But if we took SolNet Core, we wouldn't have to scream anymore. We'd speak directly to every ship, colony, and system connected to Earth's grid. We'd make sure no one could unsee what we showed them. The approach was suicide. We knew it. But none of us flinched. The Judicator came in from the shadow side of the moon, running cold, every light dimmed, hull wrapped in reflective dampeners. We couldn't cloak a ship this size, but we could slip through a blind spot Earth Command never fixed, because they never thought they'd need to. We reached orbit undetected. At least at first. But the second we breached SolNet Core's exterior shell, everything lit up. Alarms, drones, auto turrets. We launched boarding pods and sent jamming pulses. Reek led the first wave. I went with the second. We weren't there to hold ground. We were there to transmit. We cut our way through resistance. Security personnel in sleek Earth armor, confused, scared, following orders they didn't understand. We shot to wound, not kill. These weren't our enemies. The real enemy was in the command center. We reached it after 12 minutes of corridor fighting. Smoke, sparks, bodies slumped against walls. No celebration, just purpose. The broadcast chamber was massive, a circular array of panels, terminals, and live feeds from every Earth-connected channel. And at its center, a woman. Not armed, not armored, just standing behind the main terminal, hands clasped. She wore Earth black, high collar, gold insignia. I knew her face from old briefings. Director Cale Myrn, one of the Black Council members who signed off on the A1 program, one of the last voices Brax ever spoke to before leaving for Kelter. She didn't move. She just looked at me as the soldiers filed in behind me, weapons ready. "You don't have to do this," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. "You've already done it," I said. "You're going to burn everything," she replied. "Order, unity, progress. You built that unity on a lie." It worked. I stared at her, something in my chest folding in on itself. "You let him die. You made him die." She nodded, unapologetic. Because he believed too much. Because he thought words could stop the fire when all they ever do is delay it. You knew that too. That's why you were chosen. Why you're here. I stepped forward. "I'm here to end it." "No, Commander," she said. "You're here to give them another story." I raised my rifle. She didn't blink. I didn't pull the trigger, because Reek stepped forward and slammed the data core into the central terminal. And that was the moment everything changed. Across the galaxy, the live feeds shifted. Commercials, propaganda, curated reports, all blinked out. And in their place, footage began to play. Brax's unedited transmission, his raw message, his hope. Then the footage of his death. Uncut, brutal, real. Then the files from the A1 lab. The vaults beneath Archon. The Earth Command signatures on approval orders for human testing. And finally, the names. The names of every council member who had authorized the purge, the secrecy, the war, including Cale Myrn. She turned as the images flashed across the monitors, not with shock, but with acceptance. "It won't matter," she said softly. "People will still choose safety, even if it's built on blood." "They deserve to know what they're choosing," I said. She lowered her head slightly, and then, with a quick movement, she drove a hidden blade into her neck. Blood hit the console as she dropped. I didn't stop her. There was nothing left to say. We left the broadcast running. We didn't shut off SolNet Core. We let it burn in truth. As the Judicator pulled back into orbit, reports started flooding in. Fleets breaking ranks, civilian protests across the Martian colonies, independent governors declaring separation from command authority. The great machine of Earth wasn't falling apart. It was cracking open. Because finally everyone saw it, and there was no going back. I stood at the bridge of the Judicator, staring at the planet that made me, the one that gave me a badge, a rank, and a mission. Now I had none of those things. I wasn't a commander anymore. I was a man who buried his friend and burned the sky to make it mean something. Reek stepped beside me. "What now?" he asked. I took a long breath. "Now we wait," I said. "Let the galaxy decide who it wants to be." "And us?" I looked at the crew, scarred, tired, alive. "We keep the line," I said. "No more lies. No more chains. No more killing for shadows." "And if they come for us?" I smiled faintly. "Then let them." Brax is gone. The machine is broken, and the truth is finally louder than the war. Let history remember this. Humanity didn't rise because of peace. It rose because someone dared to fight for it, after it was murdered. The war machine sleeps now. Not destroyed, not dismantled, just silent. The Judicator remains in orbit above an uncharted moon, lights off, engines dormant. We never returned to Earth, never accepted amnesty, never signed a treaty. We became a ghost, our existence reduced to rumors, half-truths, and hushed warnings among military academies and intelligence circles. They're still out there, they say, watching, waiting, judging. Let them say it. Let them remember us as a myth, because the real war was never about soldiers or weapons or strategy. It was about memory, what gets remembered and what gets buried. The broadcasts we sent from SolNet Core were never taken down. Earth tried. Gods know they tried. But once the truth's out, it doesn't vanish. It just waits to be found again. Now every young cadet on every colony sees Brax's final words in training. Not because command wants them to, but because someone always does. They see the footage of his death. Unflinching. Honest. The moment a man chose peace and was killed for it. And then they see what happened next. The fire, the justice, the machine we became. And they ask themselves the only question that matters. If peace was real, why did it have to die first? I still keep the tablet, the one Brax used. It's scratched and cracked, barely functional, but I play that final message sometimes. When the stars are quiet and the crew's asleep, I sit in the dark and let his voice fill the room again. Not as a soldier, but as a man. I go not as a warrior, but as a witness. If I die, let them show you who they truly are. Let the truth become your weapon. He never fired a shot, but in the end, he changed the galaxy more than any of us. Some systems still fall. Some leaders still lie. The machine isn't gone. It just wears different armor now. But now people know to look closer. Now when a diplomat arrives with words of peace, they don't just listen to the words, they watch the hands behind them. And when soldiers like us walk into a city, people don't just fear us. They ask us why we're there. That question alone is a scar across the sky, a reminder that trust costs blood, that truth hurts, that peace is not given, it is paid for by men like Brax and enforced by men like us. I don't know how our story ends. Maybe one day they'll find the Judicator floating in the dark. Maybe they'll board her, searching for relics, secrets, or ghosts. Maybe they'll find this, and maybe they'll understand. We were never the enemy. We were the consequence, and in a galaxy built on betrayal, we chose to remember.